Firstly, you need to know that I love my wife. You and I both need to absolutely accept that, because if not, what I've done is unbelievable, and maybe unforgivable. I first met Amanda 4 years ago at a friend's roller rink birthday party. I didn't know how to skate. She didn't either. Barely able to move, surrounded by people half our age doing tricks and dance moves, we locked eyes and burst out laughing. Like awkward crabs, we lumbered to the middle of the rink and got acquainted. The rest, as they say, is history. A simple description isn't enough to understand why two people fall for each other. I could tell you that my wife Amanda has gray eyes and freckles, is 5'6" and about 140 pounds, and that she usually keeps her rust-colored hair in a high ponytail, but that doesn't explain why I'm in love with her. To understand that, you'd have to watch her stirring pasta sauce with one hand while she dances barefoot and sings along to the 80s hits blasting out of our staticky radio. You'd need to have been there while she squeezed my hand during my brother's funeral, then planned a mountain getaway for the two of us, even though I barely spoke for weeks. You'd need to know that her only pajamas are a pair of my old boxer shorts, and that she wakes me up with a hug before she leaves for work. Or at least, she used to. Before Amanda's accident, I'd have struggled to remember even one of those examples, but since this nightmare began, I recall those memories with a vividness and detail that I didn't notice before. On the night of the crash, other drivers reported seeing nothing but white and losing control on an icy roadway. The paramedics assure me that the same thing happened to my wife, but it's impossible to know. You see, Amanda was legally deceased for several minutes. She has no memory at all of what happened. Or so I thought. Physically, Amanda made a spectacular recovery. 2 months after the accident, she was walking again. 2 months after that, she was jogging. By the 6-month mark, we had run our first 10K as a couple and backpacked parts of the Appalachian Trail. Since Amanda experienced significant head trauma, doctors were most concerned with her mental health, but there too my wife exceeded our wildest hopes. Amanda had always been creative and a little flighty. What she hated most about her job as a middle school teacher were tedious tasks like number crunching and grading, but these days she has an intense focus that wasn't there before. Our piano, for example, it was a family heirloom from Amanda's grandfather that had sat in our living room gathering dust since we moved in together. At most, Amanda would play a slurred version of Chopsticks, or The Entertainer after a boozy dinner party. As I write this, it's well past midnight. Leaning back in my chair, I see a ray of golden light from the living room door, and the house is silent except for the haunting notes of Lacrimosa echoing down the hallway. Amanda told me after dinner that she wanted to get the piece absolutely perfect. She hasn't stopped playing since. When I offered her a glass of water, it was like she didn't even notice I was there. I watched her sway on the piano bench, eyes closed, her complete attention on each note, and I realized that I didn't dare to insist or break her concentration. I imagined her eyelids snapping open to reveal angry pools of inky darkness, bony hands closing around my throat, and I realized that I was afraid of the woman I love. It's understandable that a person should change after such a traumatic event, right? I tell myself that Amanda's strange new intensity is just a way to cope. I tell myself that's still my wife in front of me, and that I should be supporting her. But I'm struggling to believe it myself. I can't tell if what I'm experiencing is normal or not, because I have nothing to compare it to. Being home alone with Amanda used to feel comforting and cozy. Now, it's more like being trapped in a tiny boat with a wild animal, cut off from the rest of the world. Amanda has more energy than ever. She talks and jokes like always, but no longer looks into my eyes when she speaks. It's more like she's observing me, the way a hawk watches a mouse. If it weren't for the lack of intimacy, I think I could learn to live with the rest of it. Intimacy is a word that feels forbidden to a lot of men from my generation, something we feel we shouldn't talk about, much less need. With Amanda, I felt truly intimate with another person for the first time in my life. We were open about giving and receiving affection, physical, sexual, and emotional. A smile, a glance, or a caress could turn into something electrifying. We felt each other. We clicked. Of course, all of that is gone now. Amanda and I have barely touched each other since the incident. At first, she'd simply say, "I'm not ready." Of course, I accepted. Months later, however, nothing has changed, and Amanda still refuses to discuss the topic. With a smile and a wave, she launches into a plan for our next activity or disappears to work on one of her endless personal projects. But there's no hiding that something is wrong with my wife. She barely eats or drinks. On the rare occasions that I'm able to touch her, Amanda's skin is cold yet somehow feverish at the same time. She always pulls away before I can confirm my suspicions. Yesterday, she pulled away so fast that she sliced her arm with the bread knife she was using to make our breakfast. There was no blood. The flesh beneath my wife's skin was black, gray and mottled like a moldy sponge. Before I could examine her more closely, she rushed off to the bathroom. When she returned, the wound was gone. Not bandaged, not scarred over, just gone. She went right back to slicing bread, and when I tried to come closer, she looked from the knife to my chest in a way that frightened me. Once, it was like we could read each other's thoughts. Now, looking at the dark shape in bed beside me is like gazing into an abyss. Each night, Amanda lies in the bluish darkness of our bedroom perfectly still with her eyes closed, but I know she's not resting. She's waiting. Waiting for me to fall asleep. What she then does, I don't know. I'm not sure I want to know. The incident with the bread knife unnerved me more than I wanted to admit. If something was physically or mentally wrong with my wife, I had to make sure she got treatment. I had to force her to talk about this. Amanda was doing the laundry when I physically blocked the door with my body and confronted her. I told my wife that we hadn't hugged, kissed, or made love in months. I wasn't satisfied, but I was willing to work through this as long as we got some professional help. I said some other things too, most of which came out in stammers and sounded better in my head. When my words finally trailed off, Amanda looked me up and down like I was just one other sheet that needed washing. Her face flushed, and something moved behind her eyes. For a second, it was as though her whole face would twist and contort itself into an expression of horrible rage. Finally, she seemed to come back into control of herself. Amanda forced a smile, told me she'd take care of it, and drove off in her mint-colored Honda without telling me where she was going. It was dusk when the doorbell rang. Worried about my wife and not expecting visitors, I approached with caution. I was halfway down the immaculate wooden hallway when my wife walked in with a younger woman in tow. The girl didn't look exactly like my Amanda when we'd started dating, but was similar enough in the dim light that I did a double take. The girl wore her hair and makeup exactly as Amanda had in one of our first photos. She was even wearing the same clothes. "Consider this my surrogate." Amanda indicated the girl without any pretext or introduction at all. Maybe it was just the dim hallway or the strangeness of the situation, but Amanda's voice didn't sound like her own. It grated and warbled, like more than one voice was speaking, to use my wife's mouth. "You're what?" I sighed. "Honey, who is this?" "Look." I addressed the girl. I know we haven't met, but my wife and I are going through a lot lately, and I'd like to have a quick talk with her in private, okay?" The girl didn't respond, just stared vacantly into space. I felt a sensation I'd almost forgotten. Amanda's hand on my shoulder and her lips just inches from my ear. "Do you like her? She'll do anything you want," my wife cooed. "Anything at all." "I don't want her," I shouted. "I want you. I want to figure out what's wrong with us." No matter how much I struggled, I couldn't escape from my wife's cold, unflinching grasp. "This is how it has to be, honey." I felt Amanda's tongue caress my earlobe as she whispered, "I can't give you what you want. It's too dangerous. But she can. And if you don't want her, we'll get you another one. Just tell us what you want, baby. Anything at all." My wife's tongue wormed its way into my ear canal. It was cold and wet and far too long, and somehow I knew it was as black as her wound had been earlier. The look-alike embraced me. The girl's hungry lips searched for mine. Amanda held me in place, squeezing my shoulder till I wanted to scream in pain. "Get away from me," I roared. I shoved the girl so hard she fell backwards and hit her head against the front doorknob. When she looked up, fear and confusion had replaced the vacant look in her eyes. Who are you people?" the girl whimpered. "Where am I?" Amanda rolled her eyes and stormed toward the girl, ignoring her pitiful protests. My wife covered her look-alike's mouth with one hand and twisted her head with the other. A horrible crack echoed through the silent house. My wife had snapped the girl's neck like a twist-off bottle cap. A white foam dribbled out of the dead girl's mouth. "We love you, babe," said a voice like my wife's mixed with 1,000 others. "But sometimes you really drive us crazy." "You're not Amanda," I stated flatly to the thing in front of me. "You're wrong," my wife's voice responded. Without the chorus of voices speaking alongside her, she sounded very small and alone. "I'm here. It's just, I'm not here alone anymore. I made a deal. This way we can all experience life again. It's how it has to be. How can I explain it to you? It's just..." My wife's voice faded as a chorus joined in. "It's all so different on the other side." What can I say? I love my wife. That's why I kept watch in the roadside swamp where she buried that girl's body. We didn't talk much in the car, but I feel like we're taking an important step together. Amanda seems to think so too. When we got home, she prepared a delicious meal of spicy chicken Alfredo, sourdough bread, tomato arugula salad, and white wine. She watched me devour it with an empty plate in front of her and a smug smile on her face. Some sort of bridge has been crossed, and from now on, I doubt she'll even bother pretending to eat or sleep anymore. Now I sit awake, typing, trying to calm the adrenaline pounding through my veins, listening to the chords of Lacrimosa reverberating through the silent house. I've made my decision. I love my wife, and till death do us part isn't long enough for me.